My father-in-law asked as he lay on the sheets. "Are you washing them properly, Kate?" I shuddered to think that this would become a regular occurrence. These kinds of strange incidents might have been commonplace in my life if we had shared a residence. Even thinking about it makes me uncomfortable. My life took a turn for the worst when I got divorced due to unworkable conflicts about living arrangements. I'm Kate, and I went through a divorce when I was 60 years old. But in spite of what others may think about getting older, I think that, even at 60, life is far from finished. Even learning how to operate a computer, a skill that previously seemed beyond my capabilities, is one I've taken on. I'm not going to allow becoming older stop me from taking on new tasks since I'm learning through literature. I'm not attempting to outdo the younger generation in any way. Instead, I still consider myself to be a child at heart. I've faced my fair share of difficulties in life. 10 years after we bought our house, my husband Tom and I had finally paid off our mortgage when the problem started. When we were almost done with the financing, Tom brought up an old subject. We had purchased the house when we were in our late 20s. "How do you feel about cohabiting?" he inquired. "Cohabiting? By that, what do you mean?" "Even though I already knew," I answered. He clarified, "I mean with my parents." We'd had this conversation before, and my feelings remained the same. "Tom, I believe it would be challenging. I do not get along well with your mother. It will only get worse for us both if we move in together. Right now, everything are going well for me. Unless we try, we won't know how it turns out," he urged. "We cannot simply cease living together once we begin. You should never attempt something novel." Even though Tom had been adamantly opposed to living together prior to the wedding, he had been recommending this ever since we were married. At the time, I was relieved. But after we got married, he started to gradually change his attitude, as though he had been playing tricks on me all along. Later on, I discovered that Jane, his mother, had been begging him, saying, "I'm concerned about the future. Do you not think about us as we get older?" Unbeknownst to me, Tom had grown to feel obligated by filial piety to reside with his parents. I hoped he had known that he could say no. I can see why you would want to look after your parents, but Tom was aware of the conflict between his mother and me. Even still, he didn't seem to be fazed when our relationship grew more tense. His requests to move in together became more frequent and urgent as we approached the last payment on our mortgage. Then the doorbell rang at 7 in the morning on a Sunday. I was surprised to see my mother-in-law, Jane, and father-in-law, Mark, standing there grinning broadly when I answered it. They were surrounded by a light from the early morning sun that nearly gave the picture a hallowed quality. However, I was aware of this. "Welcome back." "Welcome back," greeted Tom, who emerged behind me as I stood there taken aback by their unexpected arrival. I reasoned that typically you say, "Thank you for inviting me," and the host responds, "Welcome." However, I couldn't help but think of Tom's recurring query, "What do you think about living with my parents?" I was no longer able to ignore this since it was unsettling. What was taking place? Returning to the room with my in-laws, I saw Jane closely examining the antique cabinet. I couldn't contain myself and questioned, "What are you doing?" She said in a worried tone, "Oh, there are quite a few scratches here. It is unfortunate to swap it out for a new one. However, Kate, you appear a little awkward. Please take more care with it going forward." "How come?" I had selected the cabinet myself, and I looked closely at the areas Jane was indicating and saw no marks. Maybe her aging eyesight was causing her to mistake the natural wood grain for damage. No, I can't see what she's talking about either, even with my old eyes. However, Jane had previously leveled similar unfounded claims. She seemed to find it intolerable that her beloved son would be taken away by a daughter-in-law. I chose to ignore her comments as usual, even though I thought they were unfair. All of a sudden, I realized that Mark had vanished from view. I heard a commotion from the second floor at that very moment. I became aware of what was happening and felt a wave of dread. To my surprise, as I went upstairs, I discovered Mark face down on my bed. Not Tom's. Not in a way. I gasped in surprise. "Kate, are you doing the sheet washing correctly?" Mark inquired, totally unaware of my fear. "Oh my God, no, 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 no!" My voice rising in incredulity, I muttered, "Without a doubt not. Please don't do it to me." I couldn't help but say things more sharply than I had intended. "What is that? A daughter-in-law showing such insolence!" Mark yelled. "My daughter-in-law has nothing to do with this." Disbelieving, I fired back. "What's the reason behind your bed sniffing?" "I just wanted to make sure it was cleaned properly." "That's unnecessary," I cried out. "There is," Mark was adamant. "It's a mandatory check for an incoming resident." With my heart racing, I questioned, "What are you talking about?" "Really?" He murmured, "I'm already nervous about having a daughter-in-law who acts so impolite. Cohabiting jointly?" As soon as Mark said those words, the unexpected reality of them struck me, and I felt my entire world tilt. I watched in disbelief as Tom and Jane materialized behind me. Notwithstanding the tension in the room, Tom remarked, "It's noisy here, so this is where everyone is." "Your father is discussing cohabitation," I managed to utter, my voice faltering. Tom questioned nonchalantly, "What's that about?" With a pit in my gut, I questioned, "What do you mean by that?" Tom stated, "This month we paid off the house mortgage, so we've decided to move in with my parents." "How come? You made that decision by yourself?" I cried out, my incredulity giving way to rage. "Have I been inquiring about cohabitation for some time now?" As though this was a plausible justification, Tom said. And I declined. I snapped back, fury in my eyes. I can't live with someone who goes around sniffing people's sheets. "Did you respond to what Mark said with that statement?" With a bewildered look on his face, Tom questioned. I tightly balled my fists, attempting to control my feelings. "Don't worry about it," Jane interjected in a sickeningly beautiful voice. "Your role is over now that the mortgage has been paid off." She flashed a big smile, as though she'd just made an amazing announcement. "What?" Unable to believe what I was hearing, I shot back. "That's correct." Mark threw in a sarcastic remark and waved me off. "You're not required anymore. You are free to leave." A chilly understanding swept over me. Thus, it was as it was. I had been nothing more than a wallet to help pay off the mortgage for years. Jane had been keeping a careful eye on our lives, waiting patiently, and never losing up on her desire to live with us. She thought she could have her cherished son back now that the mortgage was paid off in full, and I could be written off like yesterday's news. Fury bubbled up inside me as the full extent of their manipulation became clear. Certainly, I bore some responsibility for letting things get to this point, but this house was important to me too. There was no reason for me to be subjected to so much distress. But then, in a flash of inspiration, I remembered something, a fact that suddenly wiped away my despair and irritation. "All right then, that's fine," I said calmly, surprising even myself. Tom's eyes widened in shock at my unexpectedly smooth response. He had clearly never imagined that I would agree so easily. Perhaps Tom thought I would beg to stay or reconsider, but I was resolute up until the moment. I left the house. He kept suggesting, "Won't you reconsider?" But I stood my ground. Ultimately, we divorced amicably. A month after the divorce, while I was enjoying the freedom of living in a hotel, having lost my place to live, I received a message from Jane, my former mother-in-law. She insisted on meeting me. Although I found it bothersome, I agreed, slightly hopeful as I had an inkling of what it might be about. When I arrived at the cafe where we had agreed to meet, I found Jane and the rest of the family, including Tom, sitting with gloomy expressions. As soon as she saw me, Jane's eyes welled up with tears. "Kate, thank you for coming," she said, her voice shaky. "What brings everyone together? Is there something you need from me?" I asked, curious but wary. "Actually, we received the notice of the division of assets from you yesterday," Jane began. "Well, yes, it's only natural to proceed with the division of assets since we're divorced," I replied, maintaining a neutral tone. "Yes, but the situation has changed a bit from before," she continued, looking even more despondent. "How so?" I asked, sensing that something more was at play. My question seemed to dishearten them even further. "Tom's company went under," Jane finally admitted. I clapped my hands together with a smile. "I saw that coming. It was only a matter of time." "What do you mean by a matter of time?" Jane asked, her voice changing with disbelief. In recent years, Tom's salary had been decreasing, and there were signs like delayed payments last month. Those are typical precursors to a company's bankruptcy. "How could you not see it?" I responded sharply. Jane, who should have had Tom's best interest at heart, asked angrily, "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" Tom flinched in fear, clearly rattled by the conversation. "I never thought it would actually go under," he mumbled. "Normally you'd notice such signs," I retorted, incredulous at their obliviousness. "Eh?" Tom stammered, surprised by my response. I immediately pressed, "So you didn't gather us here just to say that Tom lost his job, did you?" "What's the real reason we're here?" Everyone fell silent momentarily, lost for words. Finally, Tom spoke up. "The truth is, our house burned down. That was caused by my father's smoking. We suffered a huge loss because we decided to live with my parents." Stunned, I took a moment to process the gravity of their situation. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I had indeed anticipated Tom losing his job when I decided to divorce him. I was unwilling to continue supporting a self-centered, jobless husband. Moreover, if we had lived together, I would have likely struggled with the pensioner lifestyle of my in-laws and possibly the burden of their care. Divorce seemed like the best choice for me. However, I hadn't anticipated Mark burning down the house. This was turning into quite the story to tell. "I'm sorry to hear that, but it really is a tough situation," I said, masking my amusement. "Now that my parents have also lost their home, they have nowhere to live and don't know where to start," Tom explained. "So you've become both homeless and jobless?" I remarked, unable to resist pointing out the irony. "Please stop saying it like that," Tom pleaded. "I'm technically homeless too, since I'm living in a hotel at the moment." I continued, "But I've bought a new house, so I'll be moving out of that status soon." The shock on their faces was priceless. Time to enjoy their reaction. "Do you know the high-rise condominium near the station? I'll be starting my new life there soon." A high-rise condominium? The mention of it instantly changed their expressions. It seemed a high-rise was a symbol of luxury and aspiration for them. My choice to live there wasn't out of desire for prestige, but for a secure and convenient living environment. After the divorce, I wasn't even interested in the view at all. I chose a lower floor to avoid the hassle of waiting for elevators. "We'd like to live there too, Kate. Can you forget about the past and let us live with you?" Jane asked, desperation in her voice. "That would be great, Kate. Please." Though I had half expected it, I couldn't hide my astonishment at their audacity. Asking to live with their recently divorced former daughter-in-law? Could it be that Mark intends to bring calamity even to a high-rise condominium? "I'd like to help, but I'm no longer necessary to you all. Remember, I was just a wallet to you," I said, my words dripping with sarcasm. "Actually, We've always highly valued your skills around the house, they claimed, backtracking quickly. The house felt brighter with you around, Kate. You're considerate, beautiful, and incomparable to our son. Now that he's unemployed, he's beyond our control. Their son stood silently amidst the groaning, clearly uncomfortable. It seemed that no matter how beloved a son, if he couldn't support them, he was no longer of use to them. What terrible parents. Well, if we all lived together, it might not be so bad, I said, feeding consideration, prompting shocked expressions from my in-laws and Tom. It could be more fun than I thought. What do you mean by that, Kate? Tom asked, his confusion evident. I mean it quite literally, I replied, my smile seemingly lifting everyone's spirits. However, facing my ex-husband again felt a bit awkward. Well, if that's the case, Jane interjected cheerfully, don't worry about it. Tom doesn't have to live with Kate. Tom looked surprised. What? Why not? Mark added, that's right. Tom should live somewhere else. We'll take advantage of Kate's generosity. Why am I the only one left out? Tom protested. You don't have an income, Mark explained. We have our pensions, so we can contribute to food, but you can't. I really wanted to point out that moving into a high-rise and thinking food expenses would cover everything was naive, but I chose to stay silent and watched as the family conflict unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Then why don't you, who have a pension, rent another place? I suggested. You've lost your job, and we can't afford such frivolous spending. What if something happens? Mark countered. What are you talking about? We're still young, one of them retorted. Elderly people should, Tom cut him off. How disrespectful. We still have our youth. If you're so young, then work and use that income for the future, I shot back. I can't even take a bath or go to job interviews in this situation, Tom shot back. You can always wash yourself in the river, came the reply. Always thinking about yourself, another added. Huh, you say that as if you do anything yourself, was the sharp comeback. Who's a failure? Tom shot back. We don't need such a useless son anymore. Jane attempted to mediate, asking, Are you really okay with this? But Tom's reaction only seemed to infuriate Mark further, showing no signs of backing down. Turning to me with a smirk, Mark said, This means we'll have more room, right? We're almost excited about starting a new life in the high-rise. Are you misunderstanding something? My cheerful smile seemed to confuse everyone. The size of the room is fixed from the start. I have no intention of living with you. What do you mean, Kate? Jane asked, clearly frustrated. You only mentioned that living with many people might be lively, but you never said we'd actually live together. That was the impression you gave, Jane argued. It's good to see you, who abandoned your husband, living in a high-rise, finally being seen for who you are. You've always looked down on me, and now it's clear you want nothing to do with us. Even after your house burned down, Jane added, her tone sharp. With a stern look in their direction, Tom stated, Kate is correct. I believed that obeying my parents was the proper course of action, but it appears that they are not very concerned about me. Tom's statements left the in-laws astonished, and their emotions changed as they took in the truth of what had happened. With a shaky voice, Tom said, I was wrong. Let's cancel the disarmament. So, Dad, you just want to rely on your son again because you can't live with me, right? I questioned, sarcasm seeping from my voice. No, that's not it at all, he stumbled, blushing. Seeing this, Mark, who had struck the mark, flustered. Tom's forehead was starting to reveal veins of rage. I refuse, he yelled. Parents like you? I answered, disarmament is fine with me. The in-laws begged Tom to listen now that they were in a panic, but he would not hear them. Thanks to you, I really want to start over, he replied, turning to face me. Are you serious? Are you really real? Sickened, I questioned. I mean business. I'm awake now because of what you did, Tom remarked. You still have feelings for me, but stop with that hopeful nonsense, I responded. My only thought was that it would be funny if the man who left his wife for his parents ended up fighting with them after all the cozy family attempts. I've simply considered you to be a tool for dividing up property. Property division? Tom repeated himself. You still plan to claim that from me in this situation? I stated. I couldn't care less. I signed the divorce papers quickly because I wanted to go, of course, but I still have the right to my fair portion of the divided property after the divorce. Be ready. Wait, don't you really love me? Tom pleaded incoherently. How can I love someone who has no place to live or a job? I stated. That's only possible in a fantasy world. Not at all. Unable to win me back, Tom shouted, This can't be happening. Tom became enraged. He became angry and started a ruckus, accusing his parents of being responsible for everything. I left the scene before things got any worse. I got my fair part of the property distribution, just like I promised. Though it wasn't much, it was the last of my friendship with Tom. He was now living a difficult life, struggling with diminished income and becoming distant from his parents. He experimented with day labor and lived a nomadic existence, spending nights in inexpensive hotels or parks. Due to his advanced age, he had trouble finding steady employment, and his parents appeared to have given up on him in favor of their pensions without making an effort to patch things up between them. Tom's parents continued to be a self-centered marriage for years to come. From my end, I was able to live somewhat comfortably because to investments I started before to the divorce. I have started going to a local class to improve my programming abilities. I appreciate the relationship with my classmates, even though the majority of them are kids. It's refreshing. Even though I'm childless, I feel like I've gained a lot of grandchildren. During breaks, a little girl named Livy has been studying from me after expressing interest in me. Soon, more kids started participating, fostering a friendly, lively environment. I'm committed to be true to myself and continue to have a pleasant and rewarding life, despite my varied life experiences.